Okay. Okay, welcome. Oh. I think that was saying that the sessions are being recorded and they will be available to watch afterwards. I think that's what the announcement was. But welcome back, everybody, to our third panel of the day. Do feel free to move forward if you want, especially if you are keen to ask a question, because it is quite hard to see everybody up here on the stage. So don't be shy. Do fill the seats from the front if you want to. But this is our last panel of the morning, and we really do have a brilliant international panel with us here. So I think this is very much about kind of learning from each other and learning from what's happening in different countries. So in this session, we're going to be talking about digital credentials and how having digital credentials can make it easier for the citizen to engage with the government. And building those digital credentials and login systems is something that lots of governments around the world are all doing, are all making progress on. But it's quite a challenging thing to do, and we'll probably get into some of those challenges. Involves a lot of kind of joining up behind the scenes. So any questions that you have, we are going to follow the same format that we followed for the other panels so far. I will introduce our brilliant speakers here just very quickly. I will ask our speakers 1 or 2 questions each, but then we will be throwing it open to you for the rest of the conversation. So please do have your questions, your comments, any challenges you're currently struggling with, put your hands up and we'll get through as many of those as we can before we finish our session. So in terms of the speakers that we have with us here for this session, we've got Natalie Jones, who is Director for Digital Identity at the Government Digital Service here in the UK. We've got Dominic Chan, who is CIO and Assistant Chief Executive for Products at GovTech in Singapore. And we always know when we have Singapore on the panel, they've been doing fantastic work in this area. We've got Wolfgang Ebner, who is the CDO of the Government of Austria. So fantastic to have you with us. Wolfgang, be really interesting to hear what's going on in Austria. Then we've got Marie Ostena, who is Head of Digital Identity for Visa Europe, so can give us a bit of that overview site as well, working with lots of bodies across Europe. And last but by no means least, I'm really pleased that you could make it, because we weren't sure, Amod, if you would make it here today, but we've got Amod Kumar, who is Deputy Director General for the UIDAI in India. So you're doing lots of work on digital credentials and digital ID in India, so it'll be interesting to hear not least how you roll something out at such scale across India as well. So my first question, just to set the scene, I think, so that you all know what's going on in all these different areas is, and Natalie, I'll come to you first. Can you just tell us where we are on kind of developing digital credentials and what's currently being used in the UK?
Sure. So in the UK, most of you will know that a lot of government services start with people filling in a form. It goes off somewhere into the dark. Somebody makes a decision, and at the end of that, you get some sort of output. And quite often that output can be used to access other things, either in the private sector or in other parts of government. And mostly these things right now are pieces of paper or cards or letters. And they're insecure, and you lose them, and they're actually hard to interact with other services further down the line because they're in the wrong format. So as part of the new digital blueprint for government, we've undertaken and made a commitment to digitise all these pieces of evidence by the end of 2027, to store them in a government wallet so that you'll be able to interact both with wider government services using these pieces of evidence digitally, or with the private sector as well, where that might be the right way to use them. So we're on the start of that journey, and at the moment we're planning and understanding the scale of the problem so that we can build a plan to make sure that it comes to fruition by the end of 2027.
Brilliant, fantastic, thank you. And Dominic, similarly, what's happening in Singapore?
Well, for Singapore's case, actually, we had a...
I'm not sure if that, Mike, have we got a hand out? Thanks, Anne. No.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So yeah, for Singapore, actually, we have had an opportunity to have a head start quite early on. As early as 2003, we have actually consolidated all the credentials for logging into government services. We were very fortunate because we have a centralized identity system. So we actually just built on that and made it digital, right? 2016 was when we actually started the initiative of Tell Us Once Only, where we actually further onboarded all the verifiable credentials that the Singapore government has, or information the Singapore government has of the citizen. And eventually, that is being done with Government Data Architecture 1.0, identifying single source of truth for different types of data, clarifying very clearly responsibilities of how data is being managed, and eventually this single source of truth evolved into a product called MyInfo, where citizens actually can exert these verifiable credentials, not just for public sector transactions, but also for private sector transactions. So today in Singapore, for example, you can actually exert MyInfo to apply, say, for example, a bank account, right? To the banks, actually, the KYC process is a lot simpler, a lot cheaper, and a lot more secure. So that's roughly where we are today.
Fantastic. So you definitely started the journey a bit earlier than lots of other countries. And I think one of the things you said there, which we might touch on, is you had a centralized ID system. So you had kind of one of the building blocks to start on, and not all countries have that. So it'll be interesting to hear what others think about that. Wolfgang, give us the kind of overall snapshot. Where are you in Austria at the moment?
Well, good morning, everybody, also from my side. Well, in Austria, we are concerning digital credentials, and the key for our e-government solutions as well, as we have also them more and more in use in the private sector with a technical solution that is based on the one side on the secure element of a smartphone, and on the other side on the technical solution of a two-factor authentication. We are running this system, which was called the handy signature or the mobile phone signature since years now, but only on a quite low level. But as we have also the legal basis as well as an organizational as well as an legal basis since 2 years now, we have now the so-called ID Austria, which is the electronic identity full in line with the eIDAS regulation on European level. And also with a certificate of the European Union from the highest security point of view, or the highest security standard that is fulfilling this solution. So this ID Austria is on the one side the key for several e-government solutions, for example, our application Digital Authority, the portal for companies, but is also more and more used in the private sector. And this is one of our key issues for the KYC process, for example, in banks, but also for several other occasions where you can use a state-proven digital identity that is handed out via authorities that are the same like they are issuing passports, for example, in Austria. And at the moment, with a population of 9 million people, we have more than 3.5 million of ID Austrias already in use. And they are, on the one side, the key to e-government solutions, but also, and this is also a quite big solution in Austria, it is also the basis for a platform that is called for electronic identities. So we have an electronic driving license, a car registration, an identity card, as well as a proof of the age of a person. And at the moment we have we are short before 2 million of electronic identity cards in place that can be used via smartphones.
Fantastic. So thanks. Really interesting to hear what you're doing. As you say, quite a lot of that in step with what's going on EU-wide. So that's driving some of it. But you're also doing things in Austria bespoke to Austria. So interesting, you're doing a bit of both. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is right. All in the light, of course, because we are quite active on a European level, because at the moment the technical regulations and rules of procedures for the EU ID wallet under discussion and under analysis, and it will be that next year at Christmas in 2026, on the 24th of December, the EU ID wallet, or the legal basis for this will be in place, and our ID Austria is in the light of this European level, and hopefully will be in the light of all the rules of procedure, and then be the EU ID wallet as part of the European framework.
Thanks. So a couple of things that have come up, which I've noticed already: the importance of being able to use these credentials for the public and the private sector, both sectors involved. And then again, you mentioned having some ID system as part of this, so not just some of the other documents. Marie, slightly different for you. So with Visa, you work across lots of countries in Europe. So again, maybe touching on some of the things that Wolfgang was saying there, but what are you doing with governments across Europe and what are you seeing in terms of developments on digital credentials?
Yeah, no, of course, and it's a good question. And nice to see so many people here as well today. So just as a quick reminder, Visa is a payment technology company. We make sure that it's possible to get paid and to pay others. So it's all about facilitating the payments. And governments are really important partners to us and they are very active in deploying digital identity, deploying wallets around Europe, very much around interoperability as well, but also enabling this for payment. So our approach has been to really partner with these governments as to understand what type of payment services is required. So I can give a few examples of how we are combining identity with payment. So for example, in Germany, we are working with the regions to handle disbursements for refugees. So part of that, of course, is that there's an identity validation, status validation. Yes, this is a refugee, and yes, they are eligible for getting disbursements, for getting benefits. We converted that from cash, which is painful, expensive, security risk for people handing out cash every second week. You know, there are lots of discussions in the papers about long queues for refugees needing to get cash in the hand. Risk for everybody, but we converted that to cards, and those are cards that can be used for the purposes that the money was intended, buying food within that region and so forth, in order to reduce fraud, which is a big concern. So that's a very nice example of the interactions between a verified identity, eligibility status that only the government can provide, as well as the technology that allows the payments to take place in a way that's convenient. In Africa and the CEMEA, the Middle Eastern countries, we're working with a lot of governments there that are setting up a foundational identity systems, and then, of course, piggybacking on that to enable payments. This is all about financial inclusion and about efficient government services. And again, there, the standards are important, the interoperability, but also the specific needs for those countries. And then I think the third thing to mention, touching on what was talked about regarding the European Identity Wallet, we're working on making sure that this European Identity Wallet can be used for payment authentication and for payment initiation in a way that kind of comes out of the box. That's part of the standard and that satisfies the regulation and so forth. And again, fantastic example of collaboration between private sector and public sector as well, to get this working in a way that is user-friendly as well for the consumers. So plenty of examples. There's so much interesting stuff going on now around Europe and beyond.
Fab, thank you. Yeah, really good to have those examples. The benefits of having a good kind of digital credential, digital ID system, as you say, can really help government to reduce fraud, to certify, verify that they are paying the right people, but also just to smooth that service out to make sure it's done seamlessly. And then you mentioned there as well, which is a great segue, I think, to Ahmad, how having these digital credentials can actually increase financial inclusion. And on that note, Ahmad, I want to come over to you because some of the things that you've done in India with digital IDs and digital inclusion are kind of mind-blowing in terms of the numbers of people. So could you give us a sense of...
Yeah, so everything in terms of number has to be mind-blowing because India is the most populated country in the world with 1.4 billion population. So we began with our digital ID in 2010, so it has been almost 15 years. But in these 15 years, what we have achieved is almost universal coverage, 99.9% coverage of digital IDs. So everybody in India has a digital ID. Then not only that, we have 90 million online authentications every day. So you can imagine, not only it is made for everyone, but almost everybody is using it on a day-to-day basis. And this 90 million online authentications are only online ones. They do not include the physical or the offline users. So if you combine them together, maybe 200 million times every day it is being used. And it, what we call digital identity in India is Aadhaar. Aadhaar is a Hindi word whose translation in English is foundation. So actually, when it was named Aadhaar, it is actually is a foundation for digital India or a foundation for digital governance in India. And as it was pointed out that it is very essential for financial inclusion. So because, see, before the digital identity came into being, if you wanted to open a bank account, it will take, in India, because it's a very rural country, almost 60-70% people live in villages. So to open a bank account, it will take 45 days to 2 months. And with digital identity, it took only 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And because of that, we could include everybody financially in the whole country. So now we have roughly 500 million bank accounts were opened in a span of 2 years. And so now almost everyone in India is covered financially. And then parallelly to that, the mobile revolution happened. So now what we have in India is called GEM Trinity, that is Jan Dhan account, that is financial inclusion, Aadhaar, that is digital inclusion, and mobile, that is communication inclusion. And so these three put together is a deadly combination for our country in the sense that I can reach anyone, anytime, anywhere, and transfer money as I like. And because of that, if you see the UPI revolution in India, that is, if you go to any small shop in India, even in the deep down in the villages, you scan a QR code and you make a payment, or you just take the mobile number, make a payment. And every day, 360 million transactions happen over UPI. And the money which is transacted every day is US dollar 6.4 billion. So this is what the Aadhaar has done for us. And we are going further, expanding it to private sector many areas, because initially it was planned only for giving government benefits to the people. In India, one of our prime ministers made a famous statement that if we send 100 rupees to a poor person in India, only 15 reaches him. 85 goes in the pipeline, either corruption or inefficiencies. With Aadhaar, so the Aadhaar was made with that vision in mind that we will cut down that 85. So now we have been able to do that. There is something called direct benefit transfer, which has saved the government about $42 billion in the last 12 years. But now, so this is G2C story, but now in future we are going for B2C stories, C2C stories, how you can build trust, how you can ensure in a country of 1.4 billion that if Ramesh comes to me, he's Ramesh only, he's not Rakesh or something like that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. I mean, the scale, as you say, is incredible, but really interesting to hear. We've got such different countries here, such diversity, but interesting how you've all approached this. And I'm going to have one final question to all of you, and then I'm coming over to the audience, so be ready with your questions. But my question is, so you've all given kind of some of the success stories and what you've achieved so far, but I guess I'm interested in what were the big challenges, because some countries are finding this harder than others to get off the ground. And I just wonder if there are cultural issues as well as infrastructure issues that are impacting how quickly people can do this. So I'll do one more this way. So Natty, I'll come to you first. What are the biggest lessons learned so far in terms of what's hard about this?
So I think linking back to some of the things other people have said, in the UK, we didn't have a single kind of golden record that we could then put your credentials against. And I've been leading the work on gov.uk One Login for the last 3.5 years to try and kind of consolidate records and create a single front door for all government services without creating a big kind of database of people. I think culturally in the UK, we're quite cautious about digital identity. We want it as an enabler, but we have a commitment never to do it in a mandatory way. And I think navigating and that path between the two ends, it can be a huge leveler. But equally, if you haven't got a laptop, you haven't got a mobile phone and no connectivity, a digital identity is of no use to you. And so there is a risk, I think, that we encode inequality by not making sure that our off-route pathways mature at the same rate as our digital ones. So while it's a huge enabler for vast swathes, 80% of the population, it's more challenging for others. And I think the other bit that we've kind of really struggled with to find kind of, there's no silver bullet for, is people who maybe don't have formal forms of ID. Actually, it's really hard to get a good digital identity if you haven't got a passport or driving license. And that success rates for some of the other ways you might identify people aren't what you'd hope for. It's kind of like you're putting the most needy people through the worst possible user journey. So how do you make sure that you're bringing everybody with you and you're not creating a divide between those that can easily interact with a service online and those that can't? So they've been some of the challenges we've been grappling with over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember when I was much younger, there was a big national conversation about a national ID card, and it was so controversial. I think that conversation has kind of, there's a legacy to that conversation when it comes to digital IDs in the UK. Really interesting. Dominic.
Yeah, I think for us, we're a lot more fortunate. Like what we mentioned earlier on, Singapore started since its independence with identity registration, right? So for us to actually move from a physical card to a digital identity was not too difficult. However, if you ask me what were some of the learnings that actually we had over the years, I can think of top three, right? Number one is actually, even as we had that level of trust, it wasn't also something that was inherited. It was something that was built upon layer by layer. In 2003, when we were trying to push the idea of having a consolidated credential for logging into different government services, we didn't push terms on digital identity, or we didn't explain to citizens actually what we are actually going to impose on them. But rather, we were actually very focused on solving a pain point, solving a problem. And the problem was that they had too many credentials to remember at that point in time. So similarly, 2016, when we were trying to push for verifiable credentials, it wasn't one whereby we said, look, we're going to put all your data together and we're going to empower you, right? We just wanted to tell the citizen that you only need to tell me once, and I will actually populate the data for you, right? And it was one whereby we actually built layers and layers of trust and demonstrating value to the users, even before explaining to them what we were trying to do. So I think that's the first thing that, as I reflect, right, something that maybe perhaps we stumble upon quite fortunately. The second area actually is in terms of iteration. Since the birth of SingPass in 2003, we didn't have very complex plans back then. We just wanted to solve one problem after the other. And as we go along, fast forward to today, the actual National Digital Identity suite of products consists of 9 different products that actually leverage on one another, build on each other's strength, and continue to expand its functionality. Right? So we don't know what we don't know at the beginning, so we just iterate very quickly, trial. There were products that we kill along the way, but we had to kill it very early so that we actually don't waste a lot of funds doing so. And I think the last area, I would say, which was mentioned, I think, this morning in the keynote by the Permanent Secretary of DCIT, Sarah, right? She mentioned that actually it's important to build on foundation of what the people have came before. SingPass has been around for over 20 years. I have been running the product for a few years, and since then there were 2 other people who succeed me. And along the way, the overall product direction and things that we were doing didn't change tremendously, right? It was building on the foundation of the predecessor who actually has whatever they have actually achieved since then. But if you live under the hood, we continuously upgrade the system and we continuously improve on what has been built previously so that nothing goes to waste, and we learn from experiences and lessons from our predecessor, and we continue to make it better and better every day.
Brilliant, thank you. So again, having that foundational ID system, one of the building blocks, but as you say, building those layers of trust, and then that balance between consistent foundation but iteration as well on top of that, and keeping the public with you throughout that journey. So really interesting lessons learned. Wolfgang, what would you say in Austria has been the hardest so far?
Well, first of all, of course, when there is a technical or a digital solution, there can be also technical problems, and issues occur when in the implementation phase as well as in a running system. But this is not our major problem. One of our major issues in the beginning, at least, have been organizational as well as legal constraints, of course. When talking about an electronic identity in Austria, you have several ministries involved. For example, we have a very good, we have a central inhabitants register for years now. It's run by the Ministry of Interior, who is the host and the owner of these data with all the security issues and so on. And also with the legal basis, of course. And on the other side, we are responsible for the coordination and the implementation of technical solutions, and you have also other ministries and other organizations involved. To bring these all together, and also to come to a common legal solution, it was a quite a big issue. Then, like in other countries, I guess after an election, it can also be that the competencies are shifted from one ministry to the other. So you have also other people to talk with and to come to a solution and an end. So this was one of the major constraints. At the moment, we have the issue, we already talked about it, we do not want to offer our solution, the ID Austria, for example, only for the public sector. We also want to be as a guaranteed state-proven identity also for business cases in the economy, as it was already mentioned. But that means that we have really to foster also our stakeholder management. So all the negotiations with all the partners, with banks, with assurance companies, with telecom providers, everybody who needs an identification process, for example, for the Know Your Customer process, we have to really engage with him and also to come into a discussion and also to a common solution. And it's, it takes some resources, but it's also in the end, there is an added value for all of us. And last but not least, I have to highlight that within the population, of course, this digitalization and digitized products are not always highlighted as a positive effect. And there is also some fears to do something wrong, and also the problem of the fear of data protection issues and things like that. So that means that we have to foster also our engagement in the digital skills. We did this with a digital skills offensive since the years, also to bring the mood and the sensibilization to the citizens, also to use our systems and also to trust in them.
Brilliant. Fantastic, thank you. So as you say, actually what you're saying is not really the technology that's the biggest challenge at all, it's the breaking down those silos within government, so getting the departments to work
all
together.
The framework conditions.
The political cycles can change things as well, working with the private sector and getting all of the stakeholders involved. And then actually, echoing, I think, what others have said, building that trust is harder in some countries than others, I think, in terms of those relationships between the government and what the citizen trusts you to do with their data. So really interesting. Marie, again, what would you say, having worked with lots of different governments, what would you say are some of the regular common challenges that governments are finding?
Yes, a few examples, maybe two main points. Thinking about a digital identity, credentials, a wallet that allows the consumer, the holder, the citizen to share this data, receive the data and then share it. There are two main issues. One is to encourage the consumers to bother having a wallet and adopt it and make use of it. It's all about consumer adoption. How can you make it useful enough? So I've seen markets around Europe that are very mature in identity, how the collaboration between governments and private sector has really driven the consumer adoption by identifying really useful use cases where the governments laid the foundation and the need, and private sector contributed. We have examples like the benefits for adult education in France that drove adoption of the French identity systems. We have the COVID pass that was required to visit a restaurant in Belgium during the pandemic, and you could only get it having a digital identity. You can see the link. It drove adoption. It doubled the number of users within a few months. You have the case from Sweden where the use of a bank ID meant that you can get paid your tax return or made your tax benefits quicker. It went from a few months to just a few weeks. So those kind of examples where the where the private sector and the public sector are working together to find the use cases and optimize for that. And very often linked to payments. In a way, I kind of have to say it, but on the other hand, you know that there's so many natural extensions of where you want to prove who you are because there's a purpose behind it. It's because you want to make a payment or you want to receive a benefit of sorts. So I think the consumer adoption and the collaboration with private sector, really remembering that this is an ecosystem. And then the second thing is around the private sector as well. Private sector will be a very important partner because they can benefit from, they can drive innovation, reduce, ensure regulatory compliance, reduce the friction for AML, reduce fraud and so forth by being able to benefit from a government issued or a government underwritten within a trust framework and identity. So I think what's nice to see how in the EU, and I see the same thing now in the UK, they've kind of said, this is it. This is the global standards that we are picking to make sure there's interoperability, to make sure that that we can plan for it. The MDL being picked in the UK, fantastic. This is not something that's proprietary. It's an international standard. As a bank or as another, other private sector company, I can now start to plan for the fact that this is what the technology is going to look like. This is how it's going to help my business. So overcoming that kind of that commitment or that putting a stand in the ground and saying, this is it, these are the global standards that we're going to back, and then we can work on it. So I've seen so much progress now in the last 6 months in the global standards organizations, just picking on that one, because of that clear commitment, and that's exciting.
Thank you. So having that global standard and sticking with it, again, I think echoing what you said, Dominic, about having some kind of consistency and foundation underlying it. And then it's kind of common sense, isn't it? The more you can show the benefits through good use cases, the more people are going to opt in to this, whether it's mandatory or not. And then finally, before I come to all of you for your questions, so Amod, similarly, you've achieved great things in India, but there must have been some big challenges along the way.
I think the first challenge, as you were saying, that privacy and security challenges, and so instead of having it mandatory for the people to register for digital identity, you should provide enough benefits. So, and that's what we did, because it is not mandatory in India to make Aadhaar, but still we could cover so many people by carrots, not by sticks. So, and then there were certain, like my predecessors were very thoughtful, and they brought many things in design that help people assure that their data would be safe. Like, for example, we have just a 12-digit random number. So you cannot tell anything about anyone just by looking at the number. But while we see many of other developing countries which are going for digital identity, they become too ambitious. They want to have all the details in that number, but then that number reveals a lot to others, and people don't feel safe. So that was one. Then we went for minimal number of fields, only name, date of birth, gender, and address, just these 4. And if I know someone, I already know name and gender. So there is not much to reveal. So that's why people then don't feel afraid in giving the data. Also, it helps us maintain the data very easily. We can enroll very easily. So that major challenge, just by having the minimal this thing. And then right from the beginning, we went for all the 3 biometrics so that it becomes easier, because in 1.4 billion population, if something has a probability of 0.00001, still you will have thousands of cases. So we took all the 3 digital identities in case somebody doesn't have both the hands, somebody has glaucoma in eyes, somebody has some disfigurement in face, at least we can authenticate them. So these were primary challenges. Then there were legal challenges. There were activists who went to the Supreme Court, and then we won the case. And more than half the country was enrolled before we made the law for this. So we learned along the way. So the law came in 2016. By then, more than half the country was enrolled. The third biggest challenge was that approximately 300 million people out of 1.4 billion did not have any ID whatsoever. So how do you create the first basic ID for them? So that was also a big challenge, but we found ways to handle that. And then, I think the whole panel agrees that the technological challenges are the least to conquer. So we also had a few challenges like rural areas, but I think that was the easiest part of it. These challenges were much bigger.
Fantastic, thank you. So really interesting how you approach the kind of the number, the actual ID that people have, minimizing the data that you hold on people, which might go to allaying some of the concerns that people might have in terms of these schemes. And then it's been mentioned before the importance of the legal framework, although when you introduce that is interesting. And then, yeah, creating the IDs for people that didn't have any kind of ID system at all. Really, really interesting. Thank you all. I mean, it's fascinating to hear how this is going in different countries. Who would like to ask the first question? Yes, we've got 2 hands here, and then I will come over to you at the back, and then over there. So we've got 4 questions lined up. 2 here, 1 there, and 1 over there. Okay.
Thank you. My question is about how can we address the resistance, or basically answering to the challenge of the group who are wary and cautious of the centralized database, because it becomes like the single point of failure. And the second group is about the people who are probably digitally challenged. So there is this accessibility issue to incorporate the digital ID for these people with, say, lack of technology capabilities or the tools. Probably they don't have the smartphones or working internet in their homes. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I love this as a first question because it's 2 parts, I think. One is, how do you address people who don't want to do this because they're worried about how their data is going to be collected and stored? And then how do you address people who can't maybe access digital services? So are we creating a digitally excluded group of people? Natty, I'll come back to you first on this one.
Okay, so I think on the first one, in the UK, we'll never make it mandatory, but we will make it will be easier. It will make your life easier if you adopt digital identity. And that comes back to some of the points the other panelists have made about a great user experience. I also think that as we move forwards, providing appropriate options for those that don't choose to use these channels will be a core part of our strategy. So we will never only have one way in. We accept that there will always be for people for whom that is not the right answer. And I think as we roll forwards with one login, we're making sure that we are providing a comprehensive catalogue of what those exception pathways are and making sure that they're also being invested in, so that the 20% roughly of people in the UK who either don't have the skills, the kit, or the connectivity can still access the support they need. And I think on top of that, in terms of making it safe and usable, we're also applying data minimization principles. We have this concept of a core bio, which is the smallest number of data items we can hold on you, that enables seamless access to services. And I think being very clear with the public about the data you collect, on what basis you're storing it, and where you're sharing it, and putting the user in control of that journey. So saying to them, you will share this information and we will always ask you, and it will be while you were there as part of a transaction, because it suits you to do so, not a sort of mass data sharing behind the scenes. And I think all of those things help with both the privacy side, but also inclusion, so long as we make sure that we're maintaining. Because for some people in the UK, calling somebody or going somewhere face-to-face will be the right channel. And even for one login, we have a face-to-face channel. So if you've got low digital skills, you can go to the post office and they'll help you get your digital ID. That's sort of partial inclusion, but still only any use to you if you've got a phone or a laptop where you can start the journey and end the journey digitally. If you exist in an entirely analog world, actually a paper-based route or a face-to-face experience might be the best thing for you to get you access to the services you need. So we just need to make sure that we're balancing that across as we travel forward, so we don't leave anybody behind.
Thanks. I know we've got lots of other questions. So, Amod, I want to ask you on this question of digital exclusion. Am I right in thinking in India you introduced this scheme where grandchildren could access services on behalf of their grandparents, could be kind of their digital twin?
I was in a session on bridging the digital divide using Aadhaar, and I think it doesn't lead to digital exclusion, it leads to digital inclusion. And I told about those 300 million people who had no identity, who were not in the radar of the government. Now they are digitally included. And in everybody's family, there is someone, as you said, that grandchild or maybe nephew or a son or a daughter doing something on behalf of them. And you know, in India, we have roughly 650 to 700 million smartphones. So, with a population of 1.4 billion, so that means one smartphone for every 2 persons on an average. So I think it is those concerns of increasing the digital divide are unfounded. In fact, it bridges the digital divide because everybody is on the same footing. And as far as the centralized database is concerned, I think you can build many of the security features where this doesn't get compromised. We have not had any breach so far, at least in our this thing, but then we do not let the core biometrics go out of the system. We only do authentications, so each authentication takes some 200, 300 milliseconds, but for that authentication also we make some copy and then do with the copy and then destroy the copy, something like that.
Right.
So, and then there is a lease line. So there are many security features which you can ensure where the centralized data doesn't get leaked or anything.
Thanks, Ahmad. I'm going to go on to Martin's question here, and then can you put your hand up? There's a person right over there. So right on the last one, because I haven't had many questions in there. If you could go over there after, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Martin Boyer, Government Digital Service. It's actually an extension of what Ahmad was talking about just then. My mum's getting older. She has a whole bunch of friends who are getting older. They are having to give up the 2 de facto primary paper credentials we use in this country of passports and driving licenses. They are very keen to try and adopt new technology. They're really up for it, but they find navigating complex processes a bit of a struggle. I'm really interested to hear from the panel how you handle that problem, how you let those people get value out of the digital credentials, and just the comparison between sort of UK, Singapore, Austria, and India, please.
Thank you. If you could pass the microphone there, and then right over there, if you put your hand up for the question, we'll go right to the end over there, the man at the back. Thank you. Dominic, so how have you done this in Singapore?
Well, we have always said that we want to be digital first, but never digital only. So even as we are trying to drive digitalization across the country, we always make sure that there is a service available, the physical service that's available. But even as we are digitally transforming the government to consolidate all these services, we did exactly the same for the physical part of it. We have a centralized physical service center that takes care of all government services in one single place. And when we have people who come to these service centers to transact physically, there will always be people who will nudge these people with alternative, right? To show them how easy it is if they were to actually do it online. It takes a while. As a government, we recognize that we have to serve everybody. And we're committed on this journey to continuously help people along the way. We have also programs to take care of people who are digitally excluded, people who can't afford internet connection, who can't afford a mobile phone, with government aid around that actually to support them. So not just about in terms of their confidence, in terms of their skill set, but in terms of their ability to connect, right? So that's primarily what we continuously do.
Thanks. Wolfgang, did you want to add anything from Austria? Or
Well, just we have more or less the same, because we had in the last time a very deep discussion on the so-called right for analogy, which came up also from an elder generation and some other people of the society who are not that keen with digital services. We are more or less, we have the same digital first, but not digital only. It was never anybody who wanted to do so. But what we did, or what we want to strengthen now, are the digital skills also for an elder generation. The mentioned digital offensive has several parts, and one of the major parts is it's a program. It is called Digital Overall. It's a workshop program with more than 6,000 workshops are held also in smaller villages in all over the country, and there are some really basic issues like me and my swiping device, for example, to bring the basic digital skills, also especially for an elder generation, to bring in or to use the added value that comes from the use of digital devices. And on the other side, what we are also doing is this sensibilization of the civil servants to help for a digital process, not to do it for another guy or for another person, but also helping. Just look, you can do it in this and that way, and it brings also more and more the feeling to the people. Yeah, I can use it, but I'm not obliged to, because I can also go to an authority. But the big advantage of a digital solution is you can use it 7/24, which is not the case of a physical authority at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you. We've got gentlemen over here. See.
Yeah, thanks to the panel for the insight shared so far. I'm interested in views on how government might kind of leverage identifiers that are contained in other systems, for example, kind of key banking systems, payment systems, kind of views on how to make that collaboration attractive, and then also the kind of scope to borrow trust from those systems as well when looking to provide digital ID to citizens.
Yeah, this is interesting because a lot of countries do start with a digital ID system that's been developed somewhere else. So maybe been developed by the banking sector, for example, and then kind of build on that. So, your thoughts on how do you build on something maybe that's been developed in maybe the banking sector, but other parts of the private sector, and how do you build trust as well with people? So, who would like to answer that question? I'll come to you, Maria.
So I think in our case, the digital ID came, and then it was integrated, so to say, with the banking system. So it's not it would not be the case that the whole thing was banking system was functional and then you integrated with ID, because many of the accounts were opened right from the digital ID. But banking and payments, they're all only, I think, 2 uses of identity, but there are many more other uses of identity in everyday life, because every day you need to, so in the government, there are many areas where the ID can be used to bring efficiencies. For example, biometric attendance in the schools, or when you are registering your property, your land records, your property records. So many other areas are coming up. So I think if your ID functions well, it is seamless and it is easy to authenticate anytime, anywhere, then in every area of business, it can be used to deliver efficiencies.
Thanks. And Marie, obviously this is very much your area. So is it about building those partnerships between private and public sector as well?
Yeah, so there may be, see, the partnership is a very, it's a double-edged sword, let me tell you, because if you build too many partnerships with your IDs, then profiling might become possible. So when you are building those partnerships, they are separate partnerships, separate arrows going, and the data remains in silos.
Right.
We do not connect the data because otherwise the profiling may take place.
Okay.
So you need to be very careful when you are building the partnerships.
Right. Mary?
Yeah, just adding to what was being said. There are two parts of this. One is who can establish, who has the data and the processes in order to establish a digital identity. So you'll have private sector partners like the banks in several of the markets, and where they go through a process, audited, certified, and so forth, so that everybody knows around every relying party that wants to rely on this identity can trust it because it's followed certain guidelines. So I think that's one important part of it, and there I think private sector can play a role. The EU is taking a slightly different route, but we have evidence in many markets that this can work, including the UK trust framework. So, we're all pretty excited about that. Then when it comes to how to use it and how to complement it with data from private sector, for instance, banks, then I'm excited about the wallet, kind of the wallet architecture in a way, that direction of travel for the future, where you can use the wallet to hold a payment credential, you can use it to hold proof of income, for example, that you might need to enter into a mortgage arrangement.
Right.
And that can then, because it's defined with certain assurances around the data, how it was created, how it's being shared, this built-in capabilities for sharing, for proving that it was indeed issued by an entity that you expected and you can trust, that whole trust framework around it, it can have a huge transformational impact as well on innovation, on new services, just make it a lot easier for everybody. So that I'm excited about, and I think there is important to get that collaboration going within the rules that are set so that everybody can rely on the data and the credentials that's being held.
Fantastic, thank you. I think we are pretty much out of time, but I just wanted to ask, as my final question is, we've talked about collaboration across silos, across the EU, for example, across sectors. Do you foresee a time when one country's digital credentials will be recognised globally? Like, is that an aspiration? Is that an ambition that you think could be realised? Dominic?
Yes, I think definitely that would be the holy grail in terms of digital identity. But from my observation so far, running this for quite some number of years, because of the varied level of maturity in different countries, because of different jurisdiction, different types of trust issues that different government has, I think it will probably take some time. If you look at the global situation right now, I'm watching very closely how EU is trying to pull all these things together with EIDAS 2.0. Right? I think that's probably one set of ecosystem that has the highest chance of success. There's still some teething issues up to today, but at least there were some initial efforts to do that. And they were also talking about third country interoperability with the EIDAS 2.0. So that's one area that we could all watch out for.
Fantastic, thank you. Sadly, we are out of time. I could see there were still hands up with questions. Hopefully, our speakers might hang around for a few minutes. If you want to grab them, you've got a really pressing question, please do grab them before they leave the room. But please join me in a very warm round of applause to our fantastic panel there. I always find conversations around digital ID and digital credentials really fascinating, simply because how different it is in every country. I think it's really interesting. We now have a lunch break, you might be pleased to know, because you've all been working very hard. Just to say, after lunch, so Chris Bellamy, the head of the Government Digital Service, will be in here talking about Generation Alpha, which I think is quite relevant to this conversation as well. On the Accelerate stage, they will be talking about building diverse teams and what does that mean for innovation. And I will be trying out for the first time the Transform stage, talking about getting procurement right for innovation. Enjoy your lunch break, everybody. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you very much.